Welcome, everyone, to the 2015 Kitty Lundy Memorial Lecture. My name is Naomi Adelson. I'm the Associate Dean Research in the Faculty of Liberal Arts and Professional Studies, but today I'll be acting as your MC, and delighted to do so. I would like to first invite our Dean, Ananya Mukherjee-Reid, to welcome you all here today. Thank you.
It is such an honor for me to welcome you to this beautiful event in the memory of Kitty Lundy. I'm grateful that amongst us here today we have the Lundy family, Larry Lundy and wife Elizabeth Julian, and I understand he likes to be called Larry. Their son Brett currently in India, and their grandchildren Alice and Ivy, where are you? Alice and Ivy, who are both into theater. And their cousin Jeff Harris, yes. And from Lee Loach's family, we have his daughter Alice Bartels, yes. Oh, hi. I did not have the privilege of meeting Kitty Lundy, but I did meet Lee Loach, and like many of you, had many inspiring conversations with him. And with me, it was mostly about the time in India and his very interesting stories about the very famous statistician and economist he met in India. So Katharina Lundy's life was tragically ended in an automobile accident on 21st October 1989. Her experiences as a BA student at Atkinson College gave her invaluable empathy for part-time students, and the later realities in her own life helped channel Kitty's scholarly focus towards research on part-time work in Canada. Her PhD was completed at the University of Toronto in 1977. She and her close colleague Barbara Warm produced several fine sociology texts, readers, and articles. Since her death, her husband, Dr. Larry Lundy, has completed work on second editions of several books that Kitty had written or edited. Her publications in collaboration with Barbara Warm include work in the Canadian context, Continuity Despite Change, Sociology, A Window on the World, and part-time work, Opportunity or Dead End. To honor her memory, the Lundy family established the Kitty Lundy Memorial Fund, which supports this annual lecture. Kitty was passionate about engaged learning, equity and social justice, interdisciplinary exchange, and the dissemination and exchange of ideas and knowledge with communities residing within and outside of York University. These ideas resonate deeply with our faculty. We strive to stimulate the production of new forms of knowledge, where the barriers between university and community cease to exist. Our disciplinary barriers are dissolved, and the divide between scholar and practitioner is overcome, and the academic benefits of research are committed to the realities of our human condition. All our work is motivated by a vision of the university as an engaged social actor, whose task is not only to produce and disseminate knowledge, but to foster non-exclusionary methods of production of knowledge, to acknowledge the multiple sites and the multiple ways in which knowledge is produced, and from then to open up potential alternative practices. We are also great believers in the power of creativity. Creativity stirs the soul. It moves us out of the darkness of fear and solitude, dislocation and powerlessness, experiences that have unfortunately come to characterize the human condition in these times. I'm delighted that Kitty's memory has given us this opportunity to celebrate creativity in this beautiful way. So without further ado, let me turn it over to the poets and speakers we are all waiting so eagerly to hear. Thank you.
As Dean Mukherjee-Reid said, the fundamental principles of the Kitty Lundy Annual Lecture, equity, social justice, and community and student engagement, were values truly lived by the late Professor Lee Lorch, as she said, also professor of mathematics and civil rights activist. So we're delighted this year to honor Professor Lorch's memory and social justice commitments through today's event. And as we will soon learn, there are various threads of connection between Dr. Lorch and our speaker today. A further principle of the Kitty Lundy Lecture is student engagement. As part of our student and community engagement this year, we've added two components to the Kitty Lundy Lecture. First, earlier today, David Margolick led a master class for graduate students in English and undergraduate students in creative writing. This was a moment of some real experiential education, as students had the opportunity to sit down with an author and delve more deeply with him into his craft. Also this year, our commitment to community and student engagement is being fulfilled in a way that also highlights some incredible local talent. We're joined today by special guest performers who are part of a new generation of spoken word artists. These artists were commissioned especially for today's event to write and perform poetry inspired by David Margolick's book, Elizabeth and Hazel, and the battle around desegregation in the United States. Our first performer today is Suviana. Suviana is part of a new generation of spoken word artists in Toronto. Through her poetry, she engages in thought-provoking explorations of political issues and also reflects upon love, happiness, and tragedy. In 2014, Suviana had the honor of performing her poetry with Sonia Sanchez, a leading member of the Black Arts Movement, as part of the 4th annual Celebrating Women's Voices, an event held in conjunction with International Women's Day at Ryerson University. Following Suviana will be Kareem Bennett, who's an emerging spoken word artist who grew up in the Jane Finch community. A talented writer and performer, Kareem has taken the stage at Rise, Words by the Water Poetry Slam, and the community creative, The Spot Open Mic, featured in the Red Slam Collective's Poetry Saved Our Lives. Kareem has also performed as an orator in Ring of Fire, Marlon Griffith's inspired public procession, organized also by the Art Gallery of Ontario. So without further ado, I turn the podium over to Suviana. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Suviana. I wanted to say a few words about the book before I started. Being assigned to read it, I thought it was very interesting and very moving, and I feel very grateful to be able to speak in this lecture about so far what I've read in the book. I thought it really captured little details and nuances of Hazel. Like, I personally, if anybody's read the book, love the prologue. This is my favorite, because in about the last part David mentions the dress, and I kind of like that. Just the comparison of these two women who are so much alike just by their dresses, you know? Anyways, let me get on with the poem. Inspired by this. Can I ask how everybody's feeling today? Good? Good? Okay. I'm a little nervous, but if everybody's feeling kind of in the middle, can you whisper freedom? Freedom? And if you're feeling really good today, like how I have butterflies in my stomach, can you say freedom? Freedom. Can you say freedom? Freedom. Freedom comes with a price, paid each time slanderous voices make me feel not so nice. They call me Dark Esther. Angelic like myrrh, like guardians, I beg your pardon, I've overseen wickedness. I have overseen wickedness, intentions of malice, bigotry, and prejudice. There are wind tunnels in Arkansas consuming souls to sin. Tongues of fire spew moral vows of hatred. Immorality from white to black, and spitefulness brings it back, trapped in history. Dreams beckon me to seek truth, so I asked daughters of peace, Elizabeth, did you understand their impiety? Sons of anarchy, do you recognize me? I'm the spirit within your impulses, sons of anarchy, do you recognize me? Men of humility, can you smell the aroma I bring? Castor oils dripping from trees, let me soothe your wounds of discrimination. Woman of strength, must we always use strength? We're recipients of a current offense, so I see no other option but strength. I wish Zulu woman would equip me with spirit saying freedom comes with a price, paid each time slanderous voices make me feel not so nice. I am an essence of life. An incense, color crimson, see me softly at night. Saying freedom comes with a price, paid each time slanderous voices make me feel not so nice. I am an essence of life. An incense, color crimson, see me softly at night. As a signal to fighters who fought for my rights. An incense, color crimson, see me softly at night. Thank you. And I thought your work was really great on the book.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kareem Bennett. I'm a youth artist and facilitator with the Art Gallery of York University, as well as a past mentor and alumni with Success Beyond Limits. I was very moved by the book that David provided us with. The material was very great to work with, as well as it impacted my art in a sense that I've never directed it before. So I hope you guys enjoy. Anybody has a napkin by any chance? Thank you. All right. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. All right, cool. I am a child of racial inequality. On what grounds do you find this system stable? It's 1957 and segregation has ended, yet the problems we come across in Arkansas are still racial. 2, 4, 6, 8, no, we don't want to integrate. Ignorance and hate stirred up out of lack of preparation for today. It's September 19th. My name is Elizabeth Eckford, and the only thing separating us is color in this age of the new Jim Crow. I know you're part of the majority that opposed the authority for me to attend Little Rock Central High. I'm one of 9 African-American students isolated enough to serve as a target and black enough for racial slurs, discrimination, and threats. Put yourself in their shoes and their truth, because the news says change is a process. It's May 4th. Sorry. I couldn't understand the night of May 4th. My name is John Carter, and I'm being lynched for allegedly assaulting a white woman. Thousands gathered before a black man being tied to a telephone post, riddled with 200 rounds of ammunition, and served as a bonfire. Is this not unjust? Just put yourself in their shoes and their truth, because the news says change is a process. It's 2015. And segregation has manifested. I have 2 decades of living in the Toronto Project as an African-Canadian man. I understand discrimination and violence. In silence, my writing captures the images of my experience and my history. My name is Kareem Bennett. I've never walked in their shoes and their truth, but I know that change is a process. Black lives matter most to not, sorry. Black lives matter not to the system, but those that are affected by it. Is it biased? Is it radical? Is it extreme to believe in equality in this day and age? Newspapers page black youth dying from trigger-happy policing from Ferguson to Jane every day. Sad to say, not every lost soldier even makes the page. Put yourself in their shoes and their truth, because the news says change is a process. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much. What a phenomenal introduction. David. So sorry. David Marglich is the author of Elizabeth and Hazel, Two Women of Little Rock, and wrote the New York Times obituary for the late Professor Lee Lorch, mathematician and civil rights activist. David is a contributing editor at Vanity Fair, with his latest piece on a controversy at Stanford Business School, not this one, about to come out in the next issue. He's the former legal affairs editor for the New York Times and author of 7 books. His work also appears in the New York Times Review of Books and the Wall Street Journal. To give you a sense of the scope of his interests and expertise, let me share with you the titles of his published works. They include Dreadful, The Short Life and Gay Times of John Horne Burns, A Predator Priest, Beyond Glory, Joe Louis, is it Louis or Lewis?
Louis in Canada and
Yeah,
Lewis everywhere.
that's right. I thought so. All right, Joe Louis versus Max Schmeling everywhere, thankfully, and A World on the Brink. Strange Fruit, the biography of a song, At the Bar, and Undue Influence, the epic battle for the Johnson & Johnson fortune. In addition, he's now working on 2 pieces about the Gershwin family and a book on the American 1950s television icon, Sid Caesar. Please join me in welcoming the 2015 Kitty Lundy Annual Lecturer, David Margolick, here to present to us today Elizabeth, Hazel, Lee, and Grace, an author's journey beyond an iconic photograph. Welcome.
Well, those really are 2 impossible acts to follow. It's humbling. I mean, it's very flattering, I have to say, right off the bat, to have my book talked about in that way and read by such sensitive readers, and to have when you write a book like this, you want to touch people. It's what we're in the business for, and to see the way that it touched you guys is humbling and very gratifying to me. I want to thank everybody that had anything to do with my coming here and giving this lecture. I met Larry Lundy at lunch, and he asked me to inscribe his book, and I said that that he honored me by letting me honor his late wife, and that's very much the way that I feel. It's great to be an heir to this tradition and to be a part of the whole process. I'm not as talented as you guys, and I have a text to read from. You guys are just amazed that you can perform from memory. I'm going to have to try that sometime. I also sort of felt, I have to say, that to give the Kitty Lundy Memorial Lecture, I sort of felt as if this should be an occasion when, I'm not saying I always wing it, but that I should write something a little bit more formal, and maybe almost for the historical record. So you have a formal text. You'll have a formal text out of all of this. I also want to say that it's an honor to meet Alice Lorch Bartels after all this time. I've done an awful lot of thinking about her father and mother, and I'm going to talk about them, obviously. And I interviewed Alice when I was doing the book, and it's nice to meet you at long last. I can't speak for other book writers, but I know that when I explore a new topic, I quickly go in search of heroes. Writing a book is time-consuming and lonely. Beginning one is like entering a new romantic relationship. For one thing, much of your time is devoted initially to finding a plausible candidate. Believe me, I know about this. I'm something of an expert on it. A topic and a set of people you can live with, if not necessarily happily ever after, at least contentedly for a few years. Then there is the process of getting to know those people, and if you're lucky, finding heroism in at least some of them. Why? Well, if you're going to spend 3 or 4 years delving into someone, admiring that person helps fuel you, gets you over the usual discouragements. Authors are authors for a reason. It's no accident that many of us are most comfortable standing on the fringes, watching while everyone else does. We feel a certain detachment and distance from the world, and maybe a certain estrangement and disappointment too. We, or maybe it's only I, feel a regular need for reassurance, for uplift and inspiration, to be reminded that good matters, that virtue is rewarded, that ideals are worth holding. Perhaps this new hero of mine, this latest hero, will inspire me to examine my own life and lead me to do greater deeds myself. At the same time, and you might find this contradictory, we also search for flaws in our characters, even in our new heroes. For one thing, it makes them more complicated and interesting and authentic and credible. It's a point that the young Ernest Hemingway made to his father in a letter I saw the other day at the Morgan Library in New York, where there's a Hemingway exhibition now. This is Hemingway writing to his father, 25 years old. You see, I'm trying in all my stories to get the feeling of the actual life across, not to just depict or criticize it, but to actually make it alive, so that when you have read something by me, you actually experience the thing. You can't do this without putting in the bad and the ugly as well as what is beautiful. Because if it is all beautiful, you can't believe it. Things aren't that way. That's what Hemingway wrote. Capturing the flaws in a character makes a book or article less predictable and more surprising. It's also a way of asserting our independence, an important credential to any author, to make it clear, almost defiantly, that we're not in the bag for anyone. And to the insecure writer, it's oddly reassuring. Heroes not only inspire, but reproach. They remind us of our own imperfections. So while it's thrilling to worship them, it's also nice on occasion to bring them down a peg. All of this was very much at work when I wrote Elizabeth and Hazel, Two Women of Little Rock, my book about the famous. Please appreciate my valiant attempt to avoid the word iconic, although I see it was up there before, part of the lecture title and probably my suggestion. The iconic photograph from Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957, the one of the black girl trying to go to school amidst all the jeering whites, the one that captures as well as any image I know the courage and hatred and trauma of the American Civil Rights Movement and America's enduring racial divide. It's almost superfluous to describe it. There it is, I'm sure. It's not the first time you've seen it. The best book ideas are not the ones you labor over, but the ones that fall serendipitously upon you. I went to Little Rock sometime late in the last century, by now I don't even remember exactly when, to write about Paula Jones, whom at least a few of you will remember, because Canadians know American politics much better than Americans know Canadian politics. A few of you at least will remember as the object of one of Bill Clinton's periodic bimbo eruptions. There was little heroism in that story, and I was lucky she wouldn't speak with me and that the article was scuttled. While in town, I made a pilgrimage, and that is the right word, to Little Rock Central High School, the site of the famous photograph, and the first major high school in the American South to desegregate, a crucial stop for anyone following the American civil rights itinerary. Like even the most amateur student of 20th century American history, I knew of this place, and it was a thrill for me to see it in 3 dimensions rather than in a photograph. And speaking of photographs, I, like many of you, was well acquainted with the picture of Elizabeth Eckford and Hazel Bryan taken outside Central on the morning of September 4th, 1957. I can't say when I first saw it, but once I had, it never left me. And it hardly could have because it kept popping up again in history books and newspaper articles. It was there once more naturally in the Central High School Visitors Center located at that time in the old filling station that Elizabeth, wearing the homemade cotton skirt that we just heard about, and blouse she'd fashioned especially for the first day of school, had walked by only a few minutes before the picture was taken. There was no missing that picture at the museum. It was right by the entrance, blown up to elephantine proportions, all but enveloping you as soon as you walked in. But there was a second picture of Elizabeth and Hazel that struck me that day. This second photograph was in color, and in it were two grown women, one black, one white, standing in front of Central, chatting amicably, looking to all the world like two long-lost friends happily reunited. It was Elizabeth and Hazel, each aged 55. I quickly learned it had been taken a couple of years before I got there, during the commemoration of the 40th anniversary of Central's desegregation. I say desegregation because one can hardly call the enrollment of 9 blacks in a student body of over 2,000 integration. Much to the surprise of the organizers, the apparent reconciliation of these two archetypal racial antagonists had become a major part of the anniversary celebrations, very nearly upstaging President Clinton's homecoming. How did these two women ever come back together? What journeys had they taken along the way? And what had happened once they did? Therein, I realized, lay a book, and I set out to write it. Along the way, there was no shortage of villains, though they were not always the cartoonish figures easily and conveniently imagined. As Hemingway might have said, with villains as with heroes, nuance, the inconvenient truth, the confounding or extenuating detail makes a story truer, better. But more importantly, there were many heroes, including two close to this community. Two, T-W-O, not T-O-O, two close to this community. Not surprisingly, the principal hero is Elizabeth Eckford, the black girl, 15 years old in the picture. Painfully shy and peculiarly vulnerable, a sure sign of the haphazardness with which Little Rock school officials selected the 9 pioneering black students. She is a hero for what she endured that day and the courage and dignity she displayed, as captured so beautifully in the picture. Because the Eckfords didn't yet have a telephone, she'd not gotten word that the black students, along with a group of local ministers, were to have assembled near the school for their mutual protection and would approach it all together. So she'd headed to school alone, and after being rebuffed by the National Guardsmen ringing the building, she thought they were there to protect her as she entered, but in fact they'd been instructed to keep the black students out. She had had to face the angry mob by herself. If anything, she was more of a hero for what she'd faced the rest of the school year, once she and the other black students finally got inside Central. An ambitious and intelligent young lady, she had wanted to be a lawyer like her hero, Thurgood Marshall, then the chief legal strategist for the NAACP. She opted to leave the protections of her segregated high school for Central because of the better education it offered her. The abuses inside the building, meted out by a small band of redneck students, were constant, being slammed into lockers or knocked down stairwells, or having their books scattered, or having sharpened pencils or tomatoes or snowballs with stones inside them thrown at them, or with a team of girls carefully flushing all the toilets simultaneously, being scalded in the showers, or having to sidestep the pieces of broken glass strewn on the locker room floor. The teachers and administrators and their fellow students largely looked the other way and could. The camera crews and reporters who converged on the school for a few days, even the local reporters, had long since gone home by that point. And though well aware of the difficulties, the NAACP didn't want any coverage of the black students inside the school for its own reasons. It wanted the world to think all was well with them. As one former NAACP official told me, once those kids got into the school, the NAACP moved on. There were too many battles to fight in too many other places. And if there were bodies left behind, so be it. And she was a hero, Elizabeth, for surmounting what she went on to experience long after she left Central High School. Years of depression, isolation, poverty, tragedy, and fear, including pathological stage fright, PTSD really, and from that she turned herself into a productive, empathetic, and public-spirited person, working as a probation officer and reliving her experience continually with school children, all amply detailed in my book. Though she continues to live today in the very house she left that morning for school 58 years ago, she has come a very long way. She is one of the most remarkable people I've ever had the privilege to meet. She has enriched my life. She is a hero. But there's another far less likely hero in that photograph, the white girl at the center of it, Hazel Bryan Massery. It is a dimension to the story I'd not anticipated, but here too surprises, and especially uplifting surprises, make for better stories. Only slowly did I realize this about Hazel. In fact, with her, everything happened slowly. Shortly after seeing the second photograph of them together, I'd met with Elizabeth and Hazel at a barbecue joint in Little Rock. I have to say that I was incredibly naive about all of this. I think that I was very naive about racial matters generally. I don't think I'm necessarily alone in this. I'm a relatively sophisticated guy, and I live in New York, and theoretically I have some semblance of racial understanding, but I thought that, any writer has to win over the subjects that he's going to write about, has to earn their trust, and I thought, well, the white girl turned woman, the white woman is obviously, she's not the problem, it's the black woman. I have to win her trust. And in fact, it was entirely the other way around. And this was just, my lack of sophistication. I made a very poor first impression on Hazel. Hazel was not a conventionally educated person. Elizabeth had gone to college. Elizabeth had had great difficulty, but had managed to get a college degree. Hazel, however, had not. She had quickly left Central. Her family felt the picture, which made the front pages in Little Rock and around the world, had left her vulnerable. And shortly after that, she dropped out of school altogether to get married at the age of 17. But I'd underestimated Hazel, my second mistake. She was a curious person, and after she dropped out of school, she had taught herself a lot, including a lot of history. She'd learned that blacks and Jews had allied themselves during the civil rights movement, and detecting during our lunch together that I seemed to favor Elizabeth over her, she wanted no part of me. For the next 7 years, she refused to speak with me. So Elizabeth and Hazel was very nearly just Elizabeth. Things changed only when she saw an early draft of my story in Vanity Fair. Only then did she realize I wasn't out to malign her, and only then did she begin to speak with me. To be fair about it, Hazel had been extremely unlucky. She was not one of the ringleaders of the segregationist students. That distinction belonged to the girl next to her in the picture, who had the good fortune to turn her head, there she is, to turn her head. Her father, in the rear of the crowd, had just called her at the precise moment that the picture was taken. Hazel was all of 15 years old. Hazel and Elizabeth, as I said, were both 15 when that picture was taken, and far more into boys and getting attention than she was into politics. Still, being the white girl in that famous picture, the girl with the hate-filled face, with what became the most famous scowl in the world, was never going to be easy. How can anyone ever begin to live that down, to escape from its shadow? I was telling the class this morning, we all know that when Hazel dies, that picture will be back in the New York Times. That's all she's famous for. She's very famous. She will have an obituary, unlike everybody else in that picture besides Elizabeth. Her obituary will be in the Times, and the picture will appear with it. It's going to outlast her. It will last forever. How does one attempt to escape from its shadow? In Hazel's case, the answer was at least to try, and quickly. Within a few years, Hazel was the mother of 2 young children living in a trailer just outside of Little Rock. The house that she lives in now is built on the site of that trailer, so she, like Elizabeth, is exactly where she was 50 years ago. She was living in a trailer just outside of Little Rock, her husband off working in Memphis for days at a time. On a primitive early television, she saw the next wave of disturbing images from the American South, this time of protesters being beaten or doused with hot coffee and ketchup at segregated lunch counters, or set upon by German shepherds and fire hoses. Before too long, she realized those 2 little boys playing at her feet would grow up to see a picture of their mother in a history textbook, and she'd better have an explanation for them. She also needed to become the role model she had never had, so she set out to make amends. That meant initially picking up the phone and calling Elizabeth. When she finally reached her, she explained who she was and apologized. No cameras were rolling as she did. No precursor of Oprah Winfrey stage managed it, then looked on approvingly. She'd not even discussed the matter first with her husband. The conversation between the 2 women hadn't lasted long. This was, after all, the American South circa 1961 or 62. But it was the start of several decades of good deeds Hazel performed, mostly in the Black community, to expiate her sin, culminating with her decision in 1997 to come forward and meet Elizabeth when the picture was taken. What she wanted to prove was, as she once put it, that a life is more than a moment. A life is more than a moment, and hers most certainly had become that. But far from winning her praise, it usually brought her grief, even from her own family. Though no one can say it aloud any longer, among some whites there are few worse epithets than nigger lover. Others dismissed it as a publicity, others dismissed Hazel as a publicity seeker or as an embarrassment, an ongoing embarrassment, someone who had given whites a black eye 40 years earlier and continued to give them one, who would just not have the decency to go away, who would introduce herself back into the equation. Surely the most unpredictable part of my story was how, in the years following the second picture of Elizabeth and Hazel, the 2 became friends. For all the differences they had, surprisingly, they had lots in common. Both were curious, both were readers, both loved gardening, both were oddballs in a way, with few kindred spirits to talk to, even in their own families. So they went to one another's homes and on field trips together, to flower shows and thrift shops, and shared speaking engagements before mostly school kids. They visited spas together. Were anyone who pulled up alongside them at a traffic light to have realized that the white woman at the wheel of the adjacent car and the black woman to her right were those 2, the 2 school children in the famous picture I wrote in the book, they would probably have driven right off the road. All Little Rock, maligned for decades as a bastion of bigotry, celebrated their reconciliation. Posters of the 2, juxtaposing the before and after photographs, went on sale at the Central High School Visitor Center gift shop. The poster went up at Central High School itself. But history, too, can't be whitewashed or short-circuited. How realistic was it that with a simple dose of goodwill and open-mindedness, any former racial antagonists, let alone these two prototypical ones, could ever bridge the gap between them? The relationship gradually frayed, and before long it broke down altogether. For many years now, even though they live only a few miles apart, the two have not seen one another, nor even spoken. In one of the strangest twists to the story, something I could never have imagined, it is now Hazel who feels aggrieved. Never while I was writing the book had I tried to bring them back together. I felt it wasn't my place. But when, while preparing the cover for the book, I finally asked the two to pose for one last picture together, it was Hazel, not Elizabeth, who declined. You can even see in the cover of the book there's a tear between the two of them, and we put that in deliberately to show that that there was this fissure between them, this chasm between them. You see, Elizabeth and Hazel have their flaws. Elizabeth can be stubborn, demanding, judgmental, and unforgiving, and proud. Hazel can be stubborn and unforgiving and naive and proud. All this I describe, as Hemingway says I must. It makes each of them and their situation more real. Happy endings are for Hollywood. That's why there are so many movies like The Help, but so few like Elizabeth and Hazel. Sentimentalizing and sugarcoating sell. There are other heroes in Elizabeth and Hazel, like the handful of white schoolchildren in 1957 who braved the ridicule and abuse to befriend Elizabeth and the other black students, or the white grown-ups who commended rather than ostracized Hazel for coming forward 40 years later. There's also the New York Times reporter who, casting aside his objectivity for a second, sat down next to and comforted Elizabeth seconds after her walk had ended and she'd made it to the comparative safety of the bus stop. "Don't let them see you cry," Benjamin Fine told her that day as the Little Rock crowd shouted coded anti-Semitism at him, "Go back to New York," and racial slurs too. His heart had gone out to Elizabeth, he later explained, because he had 3 young daughters of his own, one of whom by coincidence was part of an audience I spoke to just the other day. It was an honor to praise her father in front of her. Ben Fine was not the only white person to sit protectively by Elizabeth that morning. There was also a woman named Grace Lonergan Lorch. She had happened upon Elizabeth after dropping off her own daughter, Alice, at the local junior high school. Henceforth, I got to be very careful about what I say to make sure that it's all accurate. Always hard to have an eyewitness present at any one of your speaking occasions. Horrified by the mob's taunts, couldn't they see that this was just a child, she asked them. She'd gotten only jeers in return. She tried futilely to call a cab for Elizabeth. The drugstore across the street with the payphone would not let her in fact, locked the door as she approached. And then, when the bus finally came, she hopped aboard it with Elizabeth. When she told the crowd that day that 6 months from that point, they'd all hang their heads in shame, she'd been unduly optimistic. Even so, she felt compassion even for them, the crackers. This is quoting from Grace Lorch. The people who made up that mob need to look back at the picture as well, this picture, she wrote shortly thereafter. Their children too have walls to break down, not as direct victims of race prejudice, but as victims of poverty and ignorance. She too could see that history is seldom simple. The whole country was electrified by Mrs. Lorch's action in befriending little Elizabeth Eckford, Claude Barnett of the Associated Negro Press wrote afterward. Quote, "With that one gesture of human kindness, Mrs. Lorch made herself the target of every embittered hoodlum, white Citizens Council member, and Klansman, not only in Arkansas, but in neighboring Tennessee and Texas as well. One person, though, who didn't much appreciate what Grace Lorch had done that day for Elizabeth was Elizabeth herself, who thought she'd only further provoked the crowd. She had not wanted Grace Lorch to board the bus with her, she told me, and had actually been relieved when she'd gotten off. 45 years later, Elizabeth still had few kind words for her. As I say, history is complicated. As Grace Lorch happened upon Elizabeth, her husband Lee had been close by, huddling with fellow state NAACP officials as they monitored the unfolding situation at Central. Of course the Lorches were there. Whenever injustice, especially racial injustice, was on display, they invariably were. That was why, while it shocked the world, the photograph of Elizabeth and Hazel had not startled them. The picture was sort of what we had expected, Lee Lorch told me when I called him in Toronto. There didn't seem to be any need to discuss it. I had asked him, what was your reaction to the picture? He said it was no big deal to them. It was par for the course. Before World War II, Lee Lorch may have helped organize the first integrated public teachers union in the South. During the war, Grace Lorch helped newly married women like herself retain their teaching jobs in Boston's public schools. There's even a plaque honoring her outside one school in Boston, one of her schools. After the war, in the bleak early days of what's now known as the long civil rights movement, that is, before Martin Luther King Jr. came along and turned it into a mass movement, Lee and Grace Lorch helped desegregate Stuyvesant Town, the gigantic housing complex built by the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company on Manhattan's East Side. Their activism would inspire fair housing ordinances throughout the South, throughout the United States, but it also cost Lee Lorch, a mathematician, a series of teaching positions, first at City College of New York, then at Penn State, and then at Fisk University in Nashville. His precipitous downward professional spiral eventually had landed him at tiny Philander Smith College in Little Rock, a historically black institution and the only place in the United States that would have him. The first lady of the black press, Ethel Payne of the Chicago Defender, had it about right in May 1956 when she wrote, quote, "Because he believed in the principles of decency and justice and the equality of men under God, Lee Lorch and his family have been hounded through 4 states from the north to the south like refugees in displaced camps. And in the process of punishing Lee Lorch for his views, 3 proud institutions of learning have been made to grovel in the dust and bow the knee to bigotry." But the Lorches were undeterred. In Little Rock, Arkansas, as in Nashville, Tennessee, they actually tried enrolling Alice in all black schools. And Lee Lorch became active in the Arkansas State NAACP, becoming for a time the only white on its executive board. When Alice's black friends were banned from the skating rink in a local park in Little Rock, Lee Lorch didn't sit still. He complained to the authorities. In the days before the Little Rock Nine finally got into Central High School, with help from paratroopers sent in by President Eisenhower, Lorch arranged for local professors to tutor them. The Lorch's activism infuriated many whites, not surprisingly. They shunned them, threw rocks at them, burned a cross on their lawn, placed dynamite in their garage. At the local post office, workers attempted to throw away the fan mail Grace Lorch received after her pictures of her appeared in the paper. As Alice recalled for me, a black postal employee surreptitiously removed some of these letters from the trash and under cover of darkness delivered them several times to them. Alice Lorch was tormented in her own school, in some instances, by the younger siblings of the troublemakers back at Central. The state's segregationist governor, Orville Faubus, denounced the Lorches. For her troubles, Grace Lorch soon landed before a Senate subcommittee investigating subversion. That she'd been subpoenaed, someone wrote, raised the question of, quote, whether it is subversive for a Southern white woman to treat a Negro child with kindness. But blacks too found offense. Lorch had been a communist and remained a communist sympathizer. Fearful of being red-baited, mainstream civil rights organizations were wary of him. Quote, Thurgood Marshall has been busy poisoning as many people as he can against us, Lorch complained in a letter in October 1957. The best contribution you could make to the cause of full citizenship for Negroes in Arkansas at this time would be to terminate in writing your affiliation with the Little Rock branch NAACP, one official of the organization wrote to Lorch. Ultimately, Philander Smith College did not renew Lorch's contract. The Lorches were effectively banned, not just in Little Rock, but in the entire United States. They went to Canada, and in 1968 came to York. That this school took them in when no college or university across the border would was both a tribute to York and, as I learned even at lunch today, woven into its very fabric, the motto being, the way must be tried. I mean, now this is something that I've come to appreciate even today, that this was not an aberration, but that dissent and courage and originality and trying alternative ways is part of the very ethos of this place. So now, I'm still learning about the very topic of my book in coming here. I was blessed to find Lee Lorch here when I worked on Elizabeth and Hazel, and to avail myself of his papers, which he had already donated to the Clara Thomas Archives and Special Collections. And everybody there took very good care of me and packaged up his papers and sent them to me and was extremely helpful. And it's one of those great discoveries that you make when you write a book like this. You just want to find these little caches of color and contemporaneous evidence, and fortunately, Professor Lorch has saved a lot of these materials, and it greatly enhanced my book. And though Grace Lorch died long ago, and Lee Lorch died a year ago this past February at the age of 98, their gift continues, at least if you consider, for without them, I'd never be here, which is true. It's one of the reasons I'm sure that I'm here to speak to you today. So this is part of the Lorch's continuing gift to this place. Learning about people like them is one of the great joys of writing history. What could account for Lee Lorch's extraordinary courage? It is a question I ask myself whenever I encounter such a person. Partly it's a matter of character, but in his case it was also a matter of creed, and that creed was communism. Lorch had been a true believer, as one of his old colleagues, a leftist himself, recalled for me. To illustrate, he spoke of how Lorch was unperturbed when the Soviets marched into Hungary in 1956, and nine months earlier when Khrushchev denounced Stalin for his litany of crimes. To me, a child of the Cold War, this was disconcerting information, so disconcerting that 3 times now, first when I wrote Elizabeth and Hazel, then when I wrote Lee Lorch's obituary for the New York Times, and finally when I sketched out today's remarks in the last few days, I've wrestled with precisely what to do with it. Is it relevant? And even if it is it worth mentioning, especially given the malign uses, the blacklisting and worse, to which McCarthyites put such information, and the high price the Lorches paid for exercising their constitutional rights, their constitutionally protected affiliations, protected under the First Amendment of the American Constitution. It was not the first time this question has arisen for me, for if you write about mid-century race relations in the United States, you inevitably come across communists. Abel Meeropol, the man who wrote the famous anti-lynching song, Strange Fruit, the subject of another of my books, was a communist. The Daily Worker, which he and the Lorches would have read, was the first non-black paper in the country to call for the integration of Major League Baseball, a decade before Jackie Robinson actually broke the color line. The first 2 times I faced this dilemma with Lee Lorch, I didn't discuss it much. I really wanted to protect his memory and good deeds and spare myself the inevitable right-wing backlash. Yes, he did great things, but. Looking back, though, I think this was wrong, that I simultaneously shortchanged history, my readers, and Lorch himself. Writers should be writers and not rewriters or censors. They should strive to be complete. They should trust their audience to sort through the facts, even when some of those facts are unpleasant or disconcerting. And historical figures like the Lorches deserve to be explored rather than sanitized. The much reviled creed to which Lee Lorch adhered, which led him at times to indefensible positions, also helped explain his extraordinary dedication and courage. Who else would have made such sacrifices? The answer is precious few. It all goes back to the notion of heroism, whether of Elizabeth Eckford or Hazel Bryan Massery or Grayson Lee Lorch. Their flaws make them all the more human, and by being more human, they are easier to emulate, which is something all of us should do. Thank you.
Wow. We have a few more performances for you now, and after that, there'll be a reception, which I'll give you the details of in a moment. I would just ask if our performers could just come down and join us at the front here. We're gonna get, I think we have one, hey. Okay, all right. Sorry. Let me introduce Deshawn. Just give me a second. And is Destiny here? No, okay. All right. We okay? Okay. Deshawn Williams, better known as DC, is a charismatic spoken word artist and rapper who grew up in the Jane Finch community. Captivating audiences with his powerful performances, DC has been featured in Chronicles of the Outspoken and Chronicles 2013 at the Tribute Community's Recital Hall. A masterful lyricist, Deshawn writes compelling work about his life growing up on the south side of Jane Finch. DC.
Thank you. First off, I want to thank David for the great book and strong reading material. Honestly, it opened my eyes to a lot of things I would have never researched on myself. I want to thank Allison for the opportunity to be here and Success Beyond Limits family. I didn't really write this poem. I would just voice note it, save here, say a little here, voice note it, save it here. And I just did it all off feel. So when you put the voice notes together, it's called Since Way Back When, and this is how it goes. I'm gonna do my eyes closed because it's all off fills. Since way back when, they say a picture can mean 1,000 words. I'll use my 1,000 words to paint this picture. Like, my little sister, know you were blessed before we read the scriptures. Or Mister, this life was given, we ain't get to pick her. Since way back, they've been trying to figure out whose blood was richer. To brag and boast and walk around like whose dick was bigger. They say the Future's a playback, a way back, so the past can kiss my middle finger. My people slaved the hottest summers and the coldest winters. These roots engraved, still enslaved, the underground roads remembered. And cops killing unarmed brothers seem so familiar. I still love my neighbor like I love my brother. You know, La Familia. And I can never forget hearing grandma ask, why should we call the White House white now that black is present? Or seeing my grandpa cry when Barack got sworn in that he got to witness. But what's a major change with no major difference? We're from the land of the free where nothing's free, it's the cost of living. We lost Skinny Tony at 15 off a bad decision. Cause reality told him don't dream, it's either death or prison. Meaning you can live a suspect or die a victim. And since way back when, our people marched trying to figure it out. This historical maze they keep bringing around ain't a racist, but racism keeps hunting me down. Was once told we came from kings and queens, fix the crack in your crown. You ain't heard life's a gamble, stop jacking around. This is elaborated, not fabricated, it's as real as it sounds. And since way back when, the stories seem too vivid to be exaggeration, and the wounds seem too realistic to be imagination. I'm from a runaway who chose to run away when running out of patience. Wasn't around to witness, but heard it back from strangers. Like some say black lives didn't matter till Lincoln signed the paper. Others say black lives still don't matter and Lincoln did no favors. History broken like a fracture, the truth still endangered. So just know, it isn't what it seems, because that's just the way life is. I keep it in mind as I try to raise my kid. The future's yet to be told, and the past has been spoken once, twice, too many times over and over again. If there's one thing I know, it's we can't compare the times happening now to things that happened since way back when. Real.
Wow. Wow. We have one more performance. Moose, come on down. He's way back there. Abdul Qadir Moose Noor. Based in the Jane Finch community, Moose is an up-and-coming spoken word poet. He has performed his poetry at 106 in York, Freedom Fridays, and Poetry Saved My Life. Featured at the book launch of Rhymes to Reeducation, he also took the stage at Dare to Dance, Dare to Speak, an event showcasing youth talent at the Toronto Centre for the Arts. He recently performed in the MC Spoken Word event organized as part of the 7th Annual Unity Festival. Moose, thank you very much.
So I spent a lot of time kind of contemplating over what I should write on this topic and kind of figuring it out. So even though I actually wrote something, I still haven't come up with a name for this poem, but here goes. I spent my whole life contemplating on what I can't be. Blinded by my odds like Helen Keller, I can't see. Voice choked out like Eric Gardner, I can't breathe. Now my time's cut short like Bobby Schmurder, but I can't plead. My struggle is something that comes before my time. My ambition is a product that doesn't come off a factory line. My thoughts are something of my own, they are solely mine. And my color is one of the only things I share with the Little Rock Nine. See, I've always dodged racism like it was a figment of imagination. Like my pigment wasn't the sole reason that there was segregation. But like math lessons, things added up and I came to the summation of why a young man of my demeanor cannot come to rule a nation. Let's face it, although people of color have fought to gain their rights, this issue is like a work of art that can only be seen in black and white. Let's take a look at these 9 students. Take a look at their heritage. They come from kings and queens, but are downsized as African American. They enrolled into Little Rock High School because the court came to a consensus that they cannot deny these students due to the 14th Amendment. This law was passed after the American Civil War. and stated these students cannot be denied their rights based on who they are. And so in 1957, they went to that high school and they defied the nation and became the faces that started it all and helped with integration, overcame intimidation from the same land that they claim, the one that's the land of the free and the home of the brave, the land that brought Africans overseas and was built by the slaves, the land that was built on racism, man. It cuts like a blade, cut me deeply like the first time that I taught myself to shave, man. It's a shame to walk with armed escorts like a celebrity, to get mobs packed outside your school based on your identity. And although I haven't faced that injustice, it still gets to me that this whole situation is based on nothing but the colors on the shirt of a referee. But it doesn't have to be like this if we all learn to love each other. Treat thy neighbor as thyself. Share with them just like a brother. Treat them as they were a sister, father, even as your mother. We just need to love each other, heal our wounds, stitch a suture, try to treat each other better and try to build a better future. Sail through the seas of inequality, otherwise we'll drown. And the clock is steady ticking because our time is now. Thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, Destiny couldn't make it this afternoon, so that was our final performance for the afternoon. I would just want to thank everybody for coming today to the Kitty Lundy Lecture. Thank you to our speaker, David Margolick, to all of our spoken word artists, as well as to Allison Adley from York University's Art Gallery and Chris Penrose from Success Beyond Limits. Thank you so much. Thank you as well to the graduate program in English and the writing program, and to David as well for offering the masterclass to our students earlier today. Thank you as well to our student volunteers, as well as the entire team in the Faculty of LA&PS for all of your hard work in making today such a success. Finally, and most importantly, thank you, Mr. Larry Lundy, for generously supporting the Kitty Lundy Memorial Annual Lecture. Before we close here today, I would like you to take a look inside of your program. And any of you who find a gold star, we have for you a copy of David's book. And, and if you'll come and pick it up and take the gold star with you. And we've got a book signing outside, and we also have a book for sale as well. A little bit of excitement. It was a surprise. We're going to wait for that. I should have said that last, not before. So with many thanks again to everyone for coming out today, and especially our thanks to David Margolick and to our artists who are hovering at the back. We want a photograph with you and David, so please don't disappear right away. And we also invite you all now for a reception and a book signing just outside these doors. Thank you.